Hello, it's Chara here. Hope everybody's doing well this lovely Wednesday evening. I am here to share some goodness with you because spring is on its way and I'm very excited, as you could probably tell. And so I wanted to jump on and have a really brief chat with all you gorgeous health and wellness seekers to share some ancient wisdom about spring, the king of seasons, and what you can do, what your family can do to stay happy and to stay healthy this season, according to the ancient living science of Ayurveda. So I'll give it 1 second just to make sure that just to give anybody else who wants to jump on a little bit of time. How's everybody going out there? Please send a click hello or something just to let me know that you're here to say hello. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to squeeze all this goodness into about 5 minutes or so, and then I'll leave some time at the end. If you've got questions about Ayurveda, if you've got questions about springtime and some of the things that you can actually do during this time of year, which can, even though, hi Jody, even though it is warming up, and for a lot of people that means that's a good thing, that's a great feeling, and maybe we're even starting to feel a little bit better. Spring, it does sort of come with some of its challenges, and so I'll talk really briefly about some of that stuff. Thanks everybody for the thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Hey, Braun. Ooh, I wonder if that's Bronwyn or if that's just Braun. Cool name. Hi there. I'm going to dive in because there's some folks on here. So let's talk a little bit about spring. Hopefully, I'm down here in the south, and we're feeling it. I can feel that spring has kind of started to spring. Sometimes we say spring has sprung, but it started to spring, which is really great. So Ayurveda calls spring the king of seasons, and really that's in part because it's like this opportunity for us to have a fresh start. It's because we are breaking out of the heaviness of winter, and a lot of folks see spring, myself included, as this terrific opportunity to kind of start fresh, right? To kind of clear the slate. And in part that's because we're often feeling a little bit heavy during this time of year, right? At the end of the winter time, we can be feeling a little bit heavy, a little bit weighed down, perhaps even a little bit stuck. And so Ayurveda associates everything with qualities. And do you recognize any of these qualities, or some of the qualities that we associate with spring? Cold and maybe damp and a little bit heavy, sluggish, slow, a little bit dull. If any of that stuff feels familiar, just know that those are really the qualities of spring. And if you're feeling it, then some of the things that I can share with you today are going to help you to shift that a little bit. So when we consider that we're dealing with a cold, and we're dealing with a heaviness and a wetness and a dullness, which can come through in lots of different things, right? Congestion and allergies and weight gain, etc. The way that we want to offset some of this stuff in the springtime is we want to start to warm things up a little bit. It's warming up outside. We also want to warm up our foods. We want to keep those nice and warm. We want to keep our foods nice and dry. We want to have drying foods. We want to have things that are stimulating, right? So now's the time to get up and get out, but also to choose foods and spices that are going to stimulate and warm up the system. And also springtime is all about expression. We've spent a lot of time in the winter kind of holding and drawing inward. Springtime is really about expression, which is one of the reasons why one of my favorite things to do in spring, and one of my favorite things to prescribe in spring, especially when people may be feeling a little down, or a little bit heavy, as I talked about before, is singing. Singing is a great thing to do in spring, and if you don't believe me, give it a try. The sort of thing we want to watch out for in spring, as I mentioned, is things like weight gain, things like depression, things like congestion, things like lethargy. So if any of this stuff sounds familiar, just know that it's really a common thing for the season. So you're going to want to warm things up. You're going to want to dry things out. Spend some time where it's warm. Saunas are really great for the springtime, but you're also going to want to be taking spices that are warming and drying. So think cinnamon, think ginger, think turmeric, think cumin. Add those to everything you can. and also think honey. Honey's a great sweetener for this time of year. So those are a few tips for springtime. If you've got some questions, like if you're dealing with anything during this time of year, let me know, and I'll feel free to answer some of those things. I'm going to shift my computer over so that I can see, because sometimes things aren't coming up here. How is everybody doing out there with spring? I love those spices too, Jody. Those are like my absolute favorite spices. Of course, I like I like all spices, but those are really, really good, and they're especially good this time of year. And if you're feeling like like a lot of people at the end of winter, just before things start to shift, we do feel a little bit heavy and a little bit stuck. And we don't necessarily always feel like doing something like adding spices to our food is going to help. But let me just assure you, it does. So you can add those spices to just about anything, from your coffee to your porridge to your pancakes, anything you like, and they will actually really help. If you've got digestion that might be a little bit in the doldrums, as well as I talked about with the heaviness, that those spices will really help with that as well. And speaking of digestion, I did have a question from somebody that came in before that was related to ulcerative colitis. They were asking a little bit about what kinds of herbs are good for ulcerative colitis. So this is not the easiest question to answer, in part because yes, there are plenty of different herbs that we take within Ayurveda for things like ulcerative colitis, but the way that we approach any imbalance or any issue within Ayurveda really is very specific to the individual. And so it's really important for us to kind of get a sense for what's at the root of the issue that you're dealing with. And ulcerative colitis can be brought about by a bunch of different things. Anything from stress to perhaps eating foods that are a little bit inflammatory for the system, combination of the two. And so what I might prescribe, or what we might recommend you have in terms of herbs, would really depend on understanding exactly what is the cause of the issue. We do see ulcerative colitis as an issue related to heat in the body or heat in the digestive tract. And so more often than not, what we would prescribe or suggest would be something that might counter that heat. So some kinds of foods or some kinds of herbs that have cooling properties to them. And which is part of the reason why, if you've got ulcerative colitis, it's often recommended that you have diets of foods that are really easy to digest, or foods that are that are a little bit cooling or heavy or sweet, because those things can typically help to manage that heat in the system that might be causing the issue. I hope that helps. If you want to know more, I'd probably need to know more about the situation. I'm not quite sure who asked that question, but hopefully if they listen to this, they'll get that. They'll be able to get a sense for if that helps them or not. And obviously you can send me a message if you want to know more. Were there any other questions out there about spring? There's so much I could tell you about spring, but I do want to try to keep it tight for you. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll give you a couple more tips before I jump off of here. So I did mention to you the spring mantra, right? Warming. Oh, here we go. I've cut dairy and eggs recently. Feel great, but feel cold all the time. That's interesting. Wow, it's really difficult to know exactly what that could be, Camilla. Man, yeah, that's a little bit of a challenge for me, because the cold could be coming from a lot of different things. From an Ayurvedic perspective, our nature can actually contribute to our everyday experiences of things like heat or cold or lightness or dryness. And the example I would give for that is my dosha is Vata and Pitta, and the qualities of Vata are light, dry, cold, and rough, and the way that I really feel the cold all the time. That's kind of always been a part of who I am. So without having a better understanding of kind of who you are, it's hard for me to tell how, how this experience of feeling cold all the time, if that's something that's kind of part of your normal nature, or if that might be really specifically related to the foods that you're eating or the experiences that you're having. Hope that I don't know if that will help at all, but if you do have a more specific question, I'd love to give you some insights on that and maybe try to help you get to the bottom of this coldness that you're feeling. Yeah, because if cold can be really uncomfortable, and it can also help. It can also help or cause things like anxiety and all sorts of stuff. So just to jump back really quickly to spring, I mentioned that the mantra for spring: warming, right? Heating, stimulating, drying, energizing, expression. Heating, stimulating, drying. I've thrown a few in here. Heating, stimulating, drying, expression. Sorry about that. I have trouble keeping track of all those things. But those are the sorts of qualities, and those are the sorts of things that you're wanting to be doing in spring. So think about that as it relates to everything that you do. Your food, your interactions with people, the kinds of activities that you undertake. Spring is our time to lighten up. It's our time to clear things out, any of the heaviness that has accumulated over the winter time. It's a time to express yourself, right? So breaking out of that feeling of being stuck. And I suggested singing is a really good way to do it. Keep yourself nice and warm and dry this time of year. I hope that I always got to try to squeeze a lot into a short period of time for y'all, because I don't want to take up too much of your evening. I hope that this has been helpful. I will hang out for another minute or two just in case anybody has any questions that are delayed. That happens with internet, that are delayed in getting to me. But I will also just thank you for giving me a little bit of your time tonight to share Ayurveda, because it's something that I very much believe in, and that is a really practical tool for us to feel our absolute best throughout the year. So yeah, I'll just hang out for a sec, and if I don't get any other questions, then I will wrap things up. Remember, your questions, even if you want to ask a question that is kind of a general question about Ayurveda, feel free to do that, and I'd be happy to answer it. I would love to hear about how people do you dry rub your skin in the spring? Oh, thank you. Do I dry rub my skin in the spring? No, not so much. And in part, that is because of that is related to my individual dosha, which has some roughness in it. And so I personally can get quite irritated by dry rubbing. But dry rubbing is a great thing to do in the spring. It's a great way to lighten up and a great way to kind of clear away some of the accumulation. And so dry rubbing is definitely something that we suggest for most people during the springtime as part of that process of, as I mentioned before, of kind of clearing stuff out. And I love the spring. My body really likes a little bit of warming up, and that kind of moisture that shows up in the springtime. That helps to offset the dryness and the coldness in my nature. So I love spring. I love it when it shows up. It's especially good. It's a good time of year for me. How about you guys? Is spring a really good time of year for you? Is it a time, because some people, especially if you've got allergies or things like that, spring can feel like, I see this message. It can feel like a time that can be a struggle for most people. I do tend to feel the cold, however. I'd started to experience hot flashes. Clearing out my diet has resulted in reverting back to feeling cold again. Oh man, Camilla, this is sounding a little bit like a puzzle that needs to be solved. And again, a lot of it for me will come back to understanding who you are. It can really depend on what you've cleared out of your diet, because it may be, if you were experiencing heat as related to, as you mentioned, hot flashes and things like that, if you're clearing out things from your diet that are warming, like meat, or you mentioned something else that you cleared out of your diet. Oh, great. I've got to try to... Dairy is cold. Meat is actually quite warming. So if you've cleared some of that stuff out of your diet, then you may have cleared out some of the warming qualities or some of the warming aspects of your diet. And what I would recommend, because meat is also heavy, if you're wanting to have an experience, if you're wanting to lighten things up a little bit, meat is also difficult for digestion. So you're wanting to lighten things up but also warm them, spices, best thing to add to your diet. Most spices, in fact, I'd almost venture to say nearly all, are light and warming. And so adding those things to your diet, some of those things that I mentioned before, things like cinnamon and ginger, great for your digestion, both of those things, but also nice and warming and light. So adding those sorts of things back into your diet. Turmeric, great, very light, warming. Those sorts of things can perhaps help to put some of the heat back into your system without the heaviness. So I hope that helps. All right, y'all, it looks like I have come to the end of my time with you here tonight. Yes, I just saw that message. Dairy and eggs, cut back on meat. There you go. Oh, terrific. Terrific. Thank you, Camilla, for that wonderful feedback. Thank you guys all for your time tonight. I will be doing another session, I think in a month. Yes, in a month. And so if you have questions about Ayurveda, I'm always happy to answer these questions. You can pop them onto the comments here, or you can send them through and I will share as much as I can with you, without, as much as I can based on what I know. But having a little bit of this knowledge is really old, and it's very, very practical. So having a little bit of this knowledge is really helpful for helping you to get through the seasons in a way that feels really balanced and keeps you happy and blissful. So thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next time that I get a chance to spend some quality moments with you guys. Until then, namaste.